friends. Welcome to episode 276 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, having just finished my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller, Cavalier House, in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt that she's wearing. She reached out to the designer, Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our students and their access to our books every day. You will find a link to this online store in our show notes. Please note, 15% of all proceeds go to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, World Language Collection, and my conversation with Laurie Stansbury. Stansbury, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm overjoyed.
Friends, Laurie and I have crisscrossed across social media. I could have sworn we had recorded before. Apparently we've not. So here we go. According to our messaging history on Twitter, X, we first crossed paths in December of 2020, but it seems to me like we're communicating on a near weekly basis, are we not?
Yes. I took the advice for your podcast. It said, reach out, support people, let them know that your voice is heard. So I share positive comments, and I reach out to all of your makers and encourage them and tell them how they've helped me whenever I can.
Yeah, a true community. This is something that we get out of participating. When you are on a social media platform, the wonderful thing is you start networking with people. I feel like we've met in person, and yet we get to. So the really fun thing is when your virtual PLN becomes an in-person PLN, and I get to meet Laurie. I'm flying in, sort of catching the last day of your conference. The Tennessee Association of School Librarians is having your state conference. You've graciously extended an invitation. I'm leaving work on Friday and just jet setting off to visit you and your amazing people at your conference. And I get to meet and greet and see you all for just a real fast day. And I can't wait. And the really fun thing is that, friends, while appreciating a lot of you will not be able to also join me at the Tennessee Association of School Librarians State Conference, we are getting a sneak peek. Because, Laurie, tell us what you're going to be presenting on today.
I'm presenting on a world language collection and specifically how to develop it.
And again, friends, this is podcasting for the win, selfish steal, because in a few minutes, we're going to delve into all the hard work that Laurie has done And you can just sit back and enjoy this whole conversation because she is then generously sharing all of her presentation resources in the show notes. So, Laurie, let's go ahead. Would you introduce yourself? So when I was doing a little bit of my research, I mean, you have an enormous school. There are 2 school librarians in your space. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your library, the grades you serve, and the programs you offer.
So I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. My school has over 1,000 students. My most recent grant, I put down 1,066 on the application. If you pop on the website, it'll say 1,200, and that's because they roll in the preschools numbers into our school. I actually serve just under 1,100. We are K-5, and we do have 2 school librarians. So we see 2 classes at the same time. We have 8 to 9 or even 10 sections of each grade level, and we see them roughly 2 times in a 9-day rotation. It's crazy because on our days 2, 5, and 8, some of our kids have already had the lesson and some haven't. So we'll split, or one group might miss a lesson and get a new lesson. So it can be a little chaotic in that 9 days.
Wow. Okay. You win the prize. I've not heard a schedule this convoluted in quite some time, and never have I ever heard of a 9-day rotation. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me. 17 years, but only 14 years in elementary. I've done a 5-day rotation. I've done a 6-day rotation. I've also done a 4-day rotation. But do tell, what's going on in a 9-day rotation?
So my 1-6 kids, they come on day 1 and day 6. 2 comes on day 2, and then half go to day 5 and half go to day 8. 3, 9, 4, 7, and then 5. One group is just getting me for the very first time, and the other group just had me on day 2. And then the next group is going to see my 5, 8 kids will meet up with the other 2 day 2 kids on day 8. It's an interesting schedule.
I'm trying to think about what your plan book would look like. Like that is absolutely confounding. So forgive me, but you have obviously like a music, you have a gym in there, you have art. What other specials, if you forgive me, you're part of that, you're a release for the teachers to get their common planning. But what other specials are you guys offering?
So we have art, we have music, we have PE, and they also have a STEM or technology, but that doesn't meet in the rotation. That means in an extra time. Next year, we're going to get a new schedule where the STEM and technology is part of the rotation, and they're dropping a PE teacher. So PE would see their kids every 3 days.
I see.
But now they're going to be on every, I'm not sure. But our teachers, there's 2 of them, our music teachers, when our groups are like one group seen the lesson and one group hasn't, there's that one group of kids, they do now visit the other art teacher. So they have both art teachers or both music teachers in order to facilitate. So it's complicated.
At the end of the day, the important thing is that they get library. Library is part of this rotation, at least in the scheduler's eyes. So when at the elementary level, if this is part of their schedule, it has the same, importance and value that the other specials are treated with. And while there are downsides, obviously, to having a fixed schedule, the upside is you obviously are connecting with every group of kids, regardless of if this is important to the teachers or not. Because sometimes, as we in the flexible world have discovered, if it isn't important to the teachers, it's not going to be part of the kids' rotation. They're not going to become coming through the Learning Commons of the library. So I thank you for explaining that. Again, friends, if you thought your schedule was confusing, you lose because Laurie's is more. Before we dive into today's topic, you shared with me on social media, and again, you're part of that network that I encounter on a regular basis. You shared that you have had an incredible success with Donors Choose. This year alone, you raised over $16,000 for your library with a total of 70 projects over the past couple of years. I want to know what your secret is, because I'm not going to lie. I've heard that donor fatigue is a real thing. I am aware that if you tap that money tree too often, people are going to just say, I've already done this once, I've already done this twice. What are you doing to keep people responding and supporting your Donors Choose projects?
Well, honestly, I don't know what I'm doing, which parts work. No one tells me. So what I do is I definitely take advantage of the Donors Choose teacher community on Facebook. I'm a member. Each Friday, they put out a post where you can showcase a project. So I make sure to pick the project that I think is the one I want to fund the most to showcase. And I tell my community about why I want this particular project to showcase. And I don't know that gets anything. I look for the ads for Donors Choose, and I comment on all of them.
And that takes commitment, like that. There's a lot of intentionality in that.
Mm-hmm. I post more about success stories than requests for money. So you'll see a lot of posts. I got a rocket. I got a donation. I just look at all these new books. And I post that a lot to showcase what good things are happening. And I try to not request money, but once a week, or unless there's an extenuating circumstance, a match is about to happen or a project's about to close. I do post on X quite a bit more, Twitter. I'm not so worried because of the people there I've communicated and connected with. They all see me as just this person who's celebrating library and looking for resources. So I go crazy there. I post on Nextdoor as well, Instagram, Facebook. I just hit all the buttons. It seems to be working.
But that's fantastic. That really is, because, I can't think of, I'm obviously very biased, but, donating to a school library program with somebody like a librarian who's going to be, the custodian of this generosity, you can be guaranteed, as somebody just looking from the outside in, you're going to be guaranteed that this money is going to be spent in a way that's judicious and necessary and supporting the students. So good for you. I'm grateful for you, because I know that helps others. If anybody's sort of on the fence, I will be honest, I've also worked in districts where I am not allowed to use Donors Choose. And so before you make any one of these undertakings, you absolutely have to run it past your administrators, because do not always assume for 1 minute that this is something that's going to be not just encouraged, but also not allowed. So yes, definitely check with your administrator before you try this. I'm also hoping that Laurie's going to explain a little bit about the origins of this episode, because you made it happen. You made it possible. I think if others understand your journey towards the conversation we're going to have today, it might inspire them to also consider becoming a guest on the show. It's not scary. It's not intimidating. Laurie, tell us how it is that this world language collection building episode is possible.
I got to tell you, I've been wanting to do a podcast with you for a while, and I've just been rolling around. What is that topic? There was an episode you mentioned, I think the second year I was listening. You said, we could do an episode on world language collection. And I'm like, me, that's me. And I didn't speak out because I didn't feel ready. Little bit of imposter syndrome. That's the word. You reached out after an episode I did with Steve Tatrew.
Laurie, I'm going to tell you right now, the fun thing is I heard your episode with Dr. Steve Tatrew on the School Librarian Learning Network podcast, and you were talking about world languages and building that collection. And so selfishly, I realized there is some overlap in our listenership. When you were ready, I'd love to have you on the show. So yes, absolutely. We can both benefit from that hard work that you have done to make this a possibility. In addition to knowing that you wanted to be on the podcast, can I ask, what else helped you make this decision?
So after you reached out, after Steve Tatrew's episode, I had a request from Tennessee Association School Librarians, TASL, for presenters for virtual PD. And I thought, this is the motivation I need to get the presentation done for School Librarians United. Let me say yes. So Katie Capshaw and I were dialoguing about that. And then she sent me a last minute, hey, we're going to close the presenter opportunity. The link is going to close. You need to step up. So I applied. They accepted my proposal. I was presented early June. And while I was there, I had amazing encouragement, both from Katie Capshaw and the lit principal, Blake Hopper, And a colleague reached out after the presentation from Middle Tennessee and said, this is amazing. You need to present in September at the TASL conference because we need more people to hear this conversation. And so why not? Why not double dip, triple dip?
Yes, absolutely. The wonderful thing is you have some overlapping of audiences, and yet what you're able to do is take something that you've poured a great deal of energy and time into and know that you're going to sort of capitalize on as many platforms as you can to be able to get as many people to benefit. And this is wonderful because you're not putting it behind a paywall. You're not simply saying, you know what, you can find me on Teacher Pay Teacher. Absolutely not. We're going to see if we can get as many school librarians to benefit from your hard work as possible. The goal of developing a world language collection is ambitious. It requires money and a great deal of intentionality. Would you share with us what motivated you to make this decision in the first place?
That's a long story. I'm going to condense it. So when I was in college and I knew I was going to be a teacher, I took a class in multicultural education. I read a biography or a memoir by Richard Rodriguez called Hunger of Memory, The Education of Richard Rodriguez. And he actually advocates for English-only instruction, which I don't personally advocate for. However, his memoir talked about his profound silence. His parents were told to stop speaking to him in Spanish at home, and they couldn't speak English. So no one was speaking to him all day long in Spanish. He could only understand 60 English words when he started education. So I can't even imagine the impact of hearing nothing but a foreign language all day long. Just taking college Spanish, 20 minutes of hearing my professor talking nothing in Spanish was overwhelming. So why can't we offer bilingual books to kids? I became a librarian right in COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, right in COVID.
That's amazing.
So I left high school English teaching and made my way over to elementary librarianship. And there was an opportunity for grants. And I thought, well, what group of kids needs service? Well, our students who speak more than one language, they need books in their language. They should have to have that profound silence that Richard Rodriguez had. How advantageous would it be if their parents could read to them in their native language? That'll grow their reading levels and abilities in their native language. And if it's bilingual, perhaps that parent could read the English portion with their child as well. And, let's grow these kids out to be bilingual or even speak more languages than two.
I've never been bilingual. I can count 1 to 10 in about 5 languages. That's it. But I also know that if you are a reader in one language, then that passion and love of reading would also likely translate in other languages as well. I think it's worth mentioning that while you are an elementary librarian, that many of the strategies and resources that you're going to share with us today could be easily applied across all of our grade levels.
Absolutely. You have students in middle school and high school that are learning a second language for the first time. And so the principles I have to share directly relate to creating a collection to support that course development with their language acquisition in Spanish, American Sign Language, whatever language it is.
I'm glad you mentioned ASL. We have our online students who come and work in our Learning Commons, and I have students who take ASL online. There are books. There are absolutely books to help our students learn ASL, and those are really popular in my collection. So my all-time favorite part of your presentation are the photos of your kids reading in your space. Yes, the kids are adorable. I love seeing them engaged with the books. I love seeing the books in front of them. But I'm also looking at your library behind them. So you sort of got all things going on in those pictures. But you provide snapshots of 4 of your readers whose reading journeys are a credit to your efforts as a librarian. And it's such a visual treat to be able to see these students in your space engaged with the books. And you particularly honed in on those 4. Could you share with listeners why those are particularly telling?
These are the students I collect for. They're the ones who gave me the most feedback. They're the ones who have shared their journey with me. I have a Spanish reader. She started in first grade with me, and she could speak some English. And I showed her the collection. And at first she was bouncing around, checking out books with her friends, checking out bilingual books when I encouraged her to come to the Spanish section. And she finally started telling me, Ms. Stansbury, I need books that are only in Spanish so my mom can read them. I don't want the ones with the English words. I don't want bilingual, only Spanish. And my heart wanted to say, no, you need bilingual so you can read in English to your mama. But I trusted that she knew what she wanted. I continued to find Spanish-only language books for her. I've got on the slide some of her favorites, the ones she checked out multiple times, the ones she told me were amazing. And I was worried her English skills would suffer, but here we are. She is a rising fourth grader. And at the end of this third grade year, without any prompting from me, she is checking out English chapter books that are grade level appropriate at a 4.2 reading level. So it doesn't matter what language they learn in. She is a success story. She will get there. Let her read what she wants.
Again, it's such an important message for librarians like myself who don't have nearly that opportunity or the finances to be able to make this possible. But I imagine that your English language learning teachers, I mean, I forgot to sort of include them in this conversation, but can I ask, what kind of relationship do you have with those teachers in your building?
Our ELL teachers, my first year, I was eating lunch with them on the days you go out. Because that was the year I got the big grant. That COVID year, I got a $5,000 grant to start this whole thing. It was amazing. They were really excited, and they would bring me in. I made really close friends with one of them. She's recently just retired, but I continue to reach out to our ELLs a couple times a year. Sometimes they'll come in for special checkout times, or they'll ask me for specific resources. But they always encourage their students to communicate to me what books they want, if they want to read in native languages, and they'll let me know, hey, we've got a new kid with a new language. Let's get them started.
So I think what's incredible is that your ELL teachers have come to appreciate and recognize the value that their school librarian has in supporting this population of English language learners.
They certainly have. I cannot believe how many requests I get for, do you have a new resource? Can you get some new books? Our classroom teachers are also very eager to knock on the door. They'll check out books for a little mini library for a period of time. They'll tell me which curriculum topics that they would like to have Spanish or other language sources for. It's much easier to collect in Spanish and French than your other languages, but that's why I'm here, to help you figure out and navigate some of those languages.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise listeners to know that you have a significant collection of Spanish titles in your current collection, but you also house 20 other languages in your print collection. And I understand you also, I think we're going to talk about this a little, you also have a digital collection of languages, world language books in your collection.
Yes, we have physical and digital resources.
Wow. And so, friends, definitely take some time to look at the incredible presentation that Laurie has shared with us, because when you appreciate the 20 languages that you have represented in your collection, it really does speak to your commitment to support all of your students. So we've already mentioned that you have had great success with Donors Choose, and you provide a detailed list of other ways that you have funded this particular collection. Would you mind giving us a sense of what other ways you have been able to financially support this collection?
So I fund my world language collection through multiple sources. It all started with a grant from our local education foundation within our community, which they were so generous. Any other grants I've gotten, I make sure I put world language books in the purchase. They meet the criteria of the grant, so why shouldn't I include some Spanish titles? If I could find another one that will meet the needs of the grant requirement, have at it. I use an Amazon wish list. I, of course, use Donors Choose. I have a birthday book club, and I include Spanish books on that. And our local friends at the library, this is me purchasing the books, but they do have books in other languages. So I reached out to them, and I was shopping. I told them, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I found a book in French. And she said, did you see the other books? They were with the adult books for children, but it's because they're languages. So they were in the 400 nonfiction section at the book sale, and there they were. So I was able to purchase several books in French. My family that had just moved from Senegal and were all French speaking and French reading, they were so excited because now I finally had some books for them in French.
I also was really surprised you mentioned local cultural centers as well.
Yes. In Knoxville, we have local cultural centers. There's a church that collects world language books. And each year at the Knoxville Children's Festival of Reading, hosted by our local public library, they'll have a table and you can learn all about the book collection they have. And so if I want to visit that collection, I can check out books. My parents can, my students can. And this is an area I have not tapped nearly enough, but I am aware of them. It's something I definitely need to get involved in. And this community also is very empowering to our community who speak other languages, and they want those representations of those cultures and those languages in our community to be felt.
It's just so important because oftentimes, we're all looking for ways to do what we need to do, and invariably it involves money. Sometimes there are ways that it doesn't occur to us. And I got to tell you, my friends at the library, when I tell them I'm a school librarian and these books are going into our school library collection, they just hand them to me.
I wish.
Yes. And I appreciate that not everybody can do that. But if you mention, I'm never shy in mentioning that by the way, I'm a school librarian and these books are going into my school collection. Get them on a good day. And every once in a while, they'll just hand the bags to you and say, nope, you're good. Thank you so much. It is always worth a try, right? So you also, and I think it's worth mentioning, a thing or two about diversity audits.
Yes. I recently completed a diversity audit of my early reader books. And so I did that 2 years in a row. I used Donors Choose to purchase over 100 new early reader books. I'd say it was closer to 200. I don't have the social media posts in front of me, but I ran the diversity audit again to prepare for this. I went through my catalog and made sure I itemized and created catalog lists, both for me, my students, and for all of you, our listening audience, the books that are in the language, but also the books that are culturally relevant to those language speakers, so that you can access and see what I have. And it also gives me a better idea of, am I leaning too hard on the refugee experience, or do I have enough books with characters who are just doing ordinary things, living their life?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned, first of all, a couple things. When you talk about a diversity audit, that means something different to different people. What would you just sort of break down? What was your process? Did you use something that was available through your circulation software? What was the process for you for going about your diversity audit?
To do a formalized diversity audit, I did it myself. I created my own spreadsheet. I got all the titles. I created the categories of gender, the cultural categories, of course, the early readers. So you've got to have non-human as a category, robots and trains and things.
Yes, ducks and bears. Yeah.
Yes.
Unicorns.
Right?
Yes, all those culturally sensitive representation in the unicorn family. So.
Right. Well, then you've got Raoul III, who's got these animal wrestlers who are clearly Hispanic. So
I'm telling you, absolutely. And that's incredibly time consuming. I imagine your teaching partner, your fellow school librarian in your space. I'm listening to how many times you teach during the day, how many different groups you have. Were you able to pull this off without parent volunteers? What did you do to be able to because this is incredibly specific and time consuming. Please tell me you did not come in over the summer and knock this out unpaid.
No. I don't work in the summer, but I do hobby in the summer. I love what I do. So I might take an hour and just pop something in. The first year I did my early reader diversity audit, it was directly tied to a PD that my district was having. It did take more time than they had allotted, but it was hobby time before the school year started. It helps you get focused. And if my husband is traveling, I get some me time, and my library work is very important to me. So it is my hobby at times, but when he's home, it's family.
Well, and I can't throw any shade because I'm a full-time podcaster in the summer, which is a fancy way of saying me time. It's like, yeah, let's face it. I this is what I do for fun, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm glad you mentioned the refugee experience because I think it is I don't want to say anything's easy because I don't think anything is easy about our jobs. We have to be very purposeful about what we do because our time is valuable and our money is scarce. But you're right to mention that there is a representation of the refugee experience, which can sometimes overwhelm a collection in so much that it drowns out the day-to-day and the experience of being just a person living their life, or a unicorn or a duck or whatever it is, but moving past this idea that all immigrants are refugees, because I think that would not be an accurate representation for your world language collection.
No, you definitely don't want that. I think it's important to show all the different experiences life. A person in their native country, a person who's recently moved, multi-generations. They've been here and now they're the second or third generation. If you can get as many different experiences within a culture in your collection, you're doing a good representation to the unique experiences each person might encounter.
Thank you. Librarians are always considering where to purchase the books that we add to our collection. You've had experiences with many vendors and have provided a list to more than how many different vendors? I mean, I was starting to count. It's a lot. It's more than 20?
Yeah, I use 6 different jobbers. And then on top of that, there's so many different publishers that you can look to for what they're putting out. So I think back to a college class I took where we were looking at different genres and different types of books and how helpful it was to be able to see into the book, see an example, see a sample passage to better understand what is sci-fi, what is fantasy, what makes an early reader a good early reader or a good alphabet book. So I took the time to take snapshots of pictures of the books from these different publishers and shared either my own reactions or my students' reactions to these books, because I don't speak these world languages, and these books are not being typically reviewed by professional librarians. So I do take a gamble. We look at the book, the kids give me the feedback, and I determine whether or not this is something worth keeping and adding more from that particular publisher. Or is that vendor a good source for these language books?
I'm grateful that you included some screenshots because oftentimes conducting successful searches on these online catalogs involves something as simple as clicking a button.
Yes. And even a vendor or a jobber, if I use them multiple times, I might run the same search and get different results, which is incredibly frustrating. I might run a different language and get the result of this publisher and these books, which are also available in this language, but didn't show up in the initial search. So I give some tips, some tricks. Here's some keywords places. Here's the part in your advanced search where you would put this word, or here you click this, or it says, click Russian for the language, but I tell you, don't click it because you won't get the results you want. So if you are going through those jobbers, it'll tell you some tips and tricks on how to actually search for these books.
Well, and please share with listeners that it's okay to use other state lists, because I got to be honest, as somebody who rarely gets to spend money, but when I do, oftentimes I'm using recommendations that aren't from my own state, but I have found fantastic lists, including Texas does an outstanding job. I know Missouri does an outstanding job with their book awards. Lots of states have book awards and recommended lists. And just because we aren't in that state doesn't mean we can't use the hard work that they put together in curating a list by librarians. Why wouldn't I?
Right. I have a jobber that does a great job curating Spanish books, but they are who they are. They're not professional librarians. But Texas, the Tejas Book Award is amazing. These books are reviewed by Spanish reading, speaking librarians. And so when I go to this list, I know these books should belong in my library.
So I do have to ask you, the AV2 World Language Collection, is that a digital collection or is that a way that you can read the book before you buy it?
No.
Okay, I'm glad I asked.
So the AV2 World Language books I purchased, and they are a physical book. At the end of the book, you will get a code. It tells you what website to go to and a code. And all of this is in English. So this is prohibitive for your native language readers. You're going to have to help them get over those hiccups. But once you get them to the website and you enter the code, and it might ask you a passcode, okay, then you can change the language of the book. And it's between 8, 10, 12, even 16 different languages that you can read these books in. And it's by a recorded native speaker. So your student can swap between their native language and English, where I've done a lesson where my students got to hear and listen to other languages. So they would poke around, they'd hear it in English, and then they'd pick a different language for every page. The biggest trick is for a teacher is it is not compatible with a browser that has a recording tab on it. So I always have to go to incognito mode to demonstrate it to my students so that they can be able to see how to get into the book. But it does open some doors. You can get some really good nonfiction books roughly at a second, between upper first grade to second to mid third grade reading level, and in entry level topics. I have 12 different books. A couple have gotten damaged and lost along the way, but I kept the codes. So as long as I've got the code, I'm good. But they can learn about how earthquakes impact the world. They can learn about the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I've got one about sea turtles. Cats was incredibly popular. Everybody checks out cats. Lions.
Well, and I'm trying to get a visual. So these are just books in your regular collection, not world language, and just interfiled. Do you have them at all like delineated or marked that this is a book that you can go and then go online and find all of these world language versions? I would be so inclined to just take those and put them on top of the bookshelf as a collection unto itself and say, these are ones that can also be enjoyed in other languages.
So when I first purchased them, I had them in my language collection in the section labeled world languages. And that year, and then even into the next, I was doing a lot of promotion, so they would circulate. But in the third year, circulation decreased. So I moved them into my nonfiction area. They still have the world language sticker on them. And I haven't purchased any additional ones. This is definitely going to be a purchase I make next year. And there is a jobber that most of us use where you can purchase these books. And that particular jobber also has a digital subscription if you want to have access to the entire collection digitally. They have a 1-year price and an up to 3-year price. I'm not going to spend that money, but I would like to add some additional titles and do a lesson again and show the kids these books that they can find them and read them in different languages.
Well, and I like the two things that I take away from that is, number one, it's never a bad thing to switch up the location where some books are located in your collection, because you may find that you are missing a group of readers because they aren't looking in that particular section. I'm not alone in saying that I like to do book purchases in bulk. Because large orders from one company means that I'm going to opt to pay for the processing and reduces time and effort on my end, and I get those books on the shelves faster. But I'm thinking, am I right that the trade-off is when you're using multiple vendors, that in order to support your world language collection, that there will be additional time spent on your end customizing these books so that they are represented in your catalog and along with your shelving configuration?
Oh, for sure. And then you'll find a book at multiple vendors, and then which list did you put it on? So it does take a considerable amount of time. I will ask my co-librarian, sometimes we'll get a second set of eyes, and she'll read off the list and I'll be on another list and we'll look for any duplicates. Or before I had her, I used a spreadsheet, and that helped. I only made 3 double purchases that year. But hey, they were pretty good books.
So my purchasing mistake last year, and and of course I paid for processing. So when you pay for processing, there is no returning. So I went down the road and I said, I'm going to buy 2 of everything, kind of Noah's Ark. I really like having 2 copies. Our kids can buddy read. High school students like to buddy read too. And so I went through and I initially went down and said 2 of everything. And then I went back and I was like, it's a little ambitious. I'm going to go back and change a couple of these to just one copy, because I'm a little concerned and I'd run out of money, as you do. You quickly spend whatever that magic number is. And so I went back and I changed a few to 1. And the order arrives. And of course, it's all processed, shelf ready. And I'm feeling so good about myself until I unpack 12 copies of one book. Oh, no. Now, thankfully, it was a Rachel Lynn Solomon book, which gets a lot of traction. And maybe that's because I have 12 copies. But I had obviously had the 2, and then I changed it to a 1, but I didn't delete the 2. And like a, rookie mistake, I didn't double check before I hit that submit button. And sure as about 12 copies of one of her books. And so, yes, there are certain mistakes you make once. I just kind of had hoped at year 17 I wasn't going to be making such an expensive mistake. Anyhow, all right. So I feel better now. I've unloaded that. It's a mistake that other people can benefit from. And it did occur to me, like, how lucky you have a co-librarian. This is a person who is a certified school librarian with the training that you have. This is a partnership of equals, because you both are professional librarians. You both come at this with a great deal of knowledge and experience, and you can bounce ideas off of each other, not because you are going to always agree, but because it validates what you do moving forward. And maybe you don't purchase 12 books of one copy. 12 copies. Maybe that mistake would not have been made if I had trusted that there was another person who could look over my purchase order before I press submit. But how amazing to be able to work with somebody else who is a professionally trained school librarian.
It is pretty amazing. It takes, anytime you have a coworker, you have to take extra time to talk out your thinking, set goals for the day. And that time, it sucks up a little bit. Those relationships matter. But once you set that agenda, you can trust that your co-librarian is going to knock out what they've advocated and allocated for their task. And it's going to be done with excellence. And then when you're done, we take a look and we might help each other with encouragement, improve things. If you have the 2 experts in the room, how much better is your product?
Okay, I'd be way happier, but it'd be very hard to park my ego at the door. I know that there are other people who, like me, are awfully, it's very efficient when the only person's opinion who matters is mine. But wouldn't the job be more fun working with another school librarian? Like, I got to tell you, it's rare that I get to talk to somebody like yourself who works in a room with another school librarian. It's more likely you're going to work with somebody who loves libraries and really just wants to be the assistant that they're being paid to be. And my ego doesn't matter because at the end of the day, there's only one librarian in this room.
I was fortunate. I got to sit in on the interviews that hired her.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Oh, that's important because I can see how now you can be sure this is something that you invited. You invited this opportunity, and how wonderful for you. I do want to mention, and this is wonderful because when you put this presentation together, you did take the time to include 5 of your favorite authors. And I just value whenever a school librarian says, you know what, I have some favorites. I'm going to share them with you right now because it does matter when we have money that we are spending our money on something that other librarians have said, yes, this is worth your time and money.
Yes. The 5 favorites, they're not going to be the best fit for everybody. I talk about the pros and cons of each of them. But they are books that I do consider adding to my collection. And I'm very purposeful. One publisher or author, and it's both. Sometimes you'll have an author also run their own self-publishing company, and there you go. But this one particular author, the way they write the book, it's mostly in English, and then they'll throw in where you're learning a book in a non-English language. So it's great for somebody who is a speaker of that language and is learning how to read it for the first time. And they've got a parent who's bilingual. And so they have this opportunity to practice this language in a written form. Would it be good for somebody who doesn't know English? No. So you need to know who your audience is. But it is a good collection. My students who use that book series and that author love it. And they give me great feedback. Another book that might be very good in bilingual format my students enjoy, I made sure to include some not so nice reviews. So they would make sure, because the jobbers do have this series and this author for sale, make sure you double check your collection as you receive your items. But the kids like it. So why wouldn't I put it out there for you? I'd show you the pros and cons, because we are dealing with books that maybe aren't being reviewed by Kirkus.
See, and you're absolutely right. Now, I forgot to mention here that, listeners are going to be incredibly impressed with the resource that you are sharing. It is comprehensive. You've graciously hyperlinked a table of contents to assist us in navigating this presentation, which is important that I mention that now, because on slide 87, what should I buy? Something I don't usually see when I share resources with listeners is a presentation that exceeds 50 slides, let alone 87. So please understand, friends, that Laurie has created a hyperlinked table of contents. Truly, we've gone to a place where this is now a labor of love. And let us also remind listeners that you are going to triple tap this resource, your webinar, your state conference, and this episode. And Steve Tatro's episode. Quadruple win, yes? So I love slide 87. What should I buy? It's not enough to say, buy books in languages other than English. It's such an oversimplification. I hadn't even thought of it. Because you now break down the types of books that you purchase for your world language collection. Would you please elaborate? Because I think this is so vitally important. Because I think when I think of world language collection, all I think of are picture books and chapter books. But it's so much more.
Yeah, it was last year that I really had to sit down and think about this. A new school was opening in our county, and we break our county school district into regions. So I was one of the librarians invited to help select books for this particular library. And so the jobber had created a huge list. We were tasked with vetting and making sure it was appropriate for our community. And one of the questions was, which Spanish books should we buy? And so I was tasked. Out of the group, I had the largest collection and the most experience. So I had to think, what are the books and what are the categories and types that I do purchase and the kids do check out? So for all of your students, you want books about learning the language, like Spanish words at home, Spanish words at school, a picture dictionary in that language. I find that the bilingual children's books do check out, and the best are fairy tales, classics like Dr. Seuss, maybe The Hungry Caterpillar, The Rainbow Fish, and any popular authors and series you have. So if you have Pig the Pug, buy it in Spanish. And the kids love it, you need to get it in Spanish. I try to select books that are focused on the culture. So I try to look for books that have, let's say I'm selecting Arabic. I want Arabic characters, Arabic cultural storylines, but it's not a requirement. And I certainly listen to what the students ask. Teacher requests for curriculum support. So my 4th grade team reaches out, can you get the Who Was books about the major characters that have to do with the Civil War? Absolutely. And then whatever you can't keep in English, you need to find a Spanish version or a French version. So my community of French speakers, it's small, but they are prolific readers. So I managed to find, we just added the Wild Robot in French. We've got the Wild Robot in Spanish. Am I going to look for another language? As long as I've got a reader for it, yes. And with my Amazon wish list and my Daughter's Choose projects, I can get those.
I love that. Again, and I remember the picture dictionaries were some of the most, I think it was Osborne. Is it pronounced Osborne?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. But I remember the picture dictionaries for my elementary readers were the most, approachable because you had that visual that went along and they desperately wanted to see that. And we had, at the time, our students took Mandarin. So we had some Mandarin books and being able to look at that, I love that. So yes, it was very important. It's not just buy the books in those languages, but what kind of books are you buying also? So I love that. Listeners will be especially appreciative of the time and the detail that you went into putting in this next part. You explain how to organize and display these books in your library. And I think that's vitally important because it's not enough to say, oh yeah, buy these books. Okay, you've got them now. What do you do with them?
Yeah. I've been backwards and forwards. I think you made a comment in one of our pre-interview notes about how you hadn't thought this hard since library school. And I've been trying to think this thing through for 4 years now. And I have changed how I do this multiple times. So I buy a 7x5 clear acrylic frame from Dollar Tree. It cost me $1.25. I go on Canva. I make a 7x5 little sign. For the first couple of years, guess what? Sad to say, the signs were only in English. I had to hear one of your episodes that said, hello, they should be in native language too. I'm like, how did I overlook this? How did I do this? So then I redid the signs. So now the native language is at the top and the English is at the bottom. They are ABC order in English because, help me, I cannot, I've got 20 plus languages now. I need it in English for me and my co-librarian because she doesn't know that collection like I do. She's been with me 2 years. I've been there 4. It's my baby. Another thing I had, we had magazines in these Princeton files, and they are perfect. Take the magazines out, lay the Princeton file on the bookcase, and so you've got the sign, and right next to it, the Princeton file is holding all your language books together. It's perfect. So I can get 3 languages on a shelf.
So for a visual for our listeners and friends, again, this is on page 89 of Laurie's very comprehensive slide deck. But a Princeton file are these sort of plastic, but they would hold like magazines, but you've managed to have the uprights along with the face fronting. I love this because it's something that you are able to do so that you've got the visual, but you've also got those books right there so that they can pick from them. I think that's amazing. Well, and again, you've probably experimented with different, configurations, and this is what works.
It does. That Princeton file doesn't have a lip like a magazine holder will. And so the kids can pull the book out directly. It keeps them together. And it just saves my life.
But you're right, because a magazine file that it would be covering up a great deal of the spine, like almost like a third of the spine. or maybe even half of the spine because you can't pull them out. Okay, now I get it. And now, friends, check the visual. So I want you to also mention something about your cataloging considerations because, again, an oversimplification of this is just, hey, here are the books you should buy. Not just that, here's how you should display them. Oh, wait a minute, here's how you catalog them. So I think we've also had to have similar conversations when you've genrefied or when you're talking about manga or your graphic novels. But what kinds of things do you do to make your world language collection more accessible digitally in your catalog, representative in your catalog?
So in the catalog, I make sure that all of these books are in a sublocation called languages. And rather than having 21 separate or even more locations, it's just languages. So they're going to look for the sign. They're going to look for that language sign. And if they don't know which language that book is, I am so happy to help them. I can go to the catalog. I can read the data that goes with that. It'll say in their Arabic language materials or Turkish language materials, and I can find that from there. Another thing I like to do is if a book is in 3 or more languages, I use my world language sticker.
So, pause.
Mm-hmm.
When would you have a book in 3 or more languages?
My AV2 world languages can be translated into multiple languages. And then you have books like Around the World in 18 Ways. And it will play with language like, this is how you say hello, or this is how you say goodbye, or house. And it'll mention multiple languages. So you've got a few of those that are fun.
Okay. I love this because you want to start a fight with a bunch of librarians. Talk about spine labels. For some people, this is the hill they'll die on. I happen to have seen extremes when it comes to spine labels. I have a couple from a past library where I could see less than about a 1/4 inch of the actual spine because somebody had been spine label happy and gone up and down both the top and the bottom. But when it comes to your spine labels, tell us a little bit about what you do that works best in your space.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Amy, because that conversation you had about those genre stickers covering up the whole spine was in my forethought when I was trying to solve this problem. I need to keep these stickers small. First, I have German books in German and German books that are bilingual. So I need a bilingual sticker that clearly states that that book is in 2 languages. So I've got a bilingual sticker I use across the board with all the languages. So you'll see this bright yellow colored sticker that says bilingual, and that'll be at the very top. Underneath will be the language name. Now, the Spanish I buy from Dimco. It's already pre-printed, Spanish, Espanol. But the other languages, I just make myself. So I give you 2 options. My colleague uses a Word document, and she's got the Demco 1x1, and I can't even read that. But I've got it linked. It's our spine label that we use, and she's created these language stickers in Word, and she has backlit, the background is purple. So now all of our books, and this is moving forward. We've got a ton that are just white. But moving forward, you'll see this bright yellow sticker that says bilingual, and then underneath will be the language in purple sticker, whether it's the one from Demco or the one we make in-house, and it says the language in English and then the language in the native spelling. And then you've got, what do I actually put on my call numbers on the spine label? So we thought this through. There's lots of ways to do it, and I show you the way I do it, plus the considerations I have deselected for my reasons, and I give my reasons. If a book is bilingual, I use the call number it would be traditionally. So it'll say E and then the author's last name, just the same as always. But if it is in that language only, I use that language's call number. Then beneath would be the section that it would appear from, and then the author's last name. That way, as your collection expands, say my Spanish books, I have 248 now, I need a Spanish section that clearly says 468 GF and then the author's last name. That way I can, my colleague who is not as familiar with this collection as me can immediately see that 468. She sees Spanish above it. And then she knows, okay, it says GF. There's no bilingual sticker because it's only in Spanish. And she knows which shelf to put it on.
I would imagine, though, even if you aren't working with another person, that consistency, you have to be sort of, once you set something up, you sort of stay consistent to it because you're going to be revisiting this collection again and again and again. So no, that makes a great deal of sense. You know, I'm so grateful that you have made the commitment to create such a comprehensive slide deck to walk somebody else through this process, because I feel like after sort of becoming acquainted with your collection, I can really see how this has taken shape in your space and what you want this to do moving forward. It's not a one and done. I imagine you have other things you want to do moving forward. How do you see, you've got such a great foundation. What do you see moving forward? Because you know, looking ahead to next year, what are you hoping to do with this world language collection moving forward? It's always growing. Like, what's going to happen?
So we have some Jewish students, so I'd like to add Hebrew. And I have 4 languages that I have not added yet, but we have students that speak those languages: Albanian, Bengali, Swahili, and Sinhalese. And I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but I'm pretty close. And those 4 will be added. I try to add 1 language book per year through DonorsChoose or Amazon Wishlist to cover adding some additional language books in those languages, even if students have fallen away, because I might, like right now, my Turkish collection is pretty big because I had a family come in who speaks Turkmen. After some research, 90% of the words are the same as Turkish, so I felt comfortable selecting Turkish titles, and they've moved. But that doesn't mean they're not going to return. My students from Micronesia move and hop from school to school. So I still am on the lookout for titles in the Micronesian languages that these students speak. They don't speak all the same language. There's more than one. And unfortunately, I cannot find those books. But I will keep looking because they might be there half of the year, but they're going to come back. My student who is from Micronesia, he checks those out every single time he returns to our school, and he looks and he's so proud that his books are there.
You know, I saw that you had books in Tagalog, and I was like, hey, my first job, I taught on Guam. And by the way, there is a listener out there I know who's tuning in who's on Guam right now. So I taught at Simon Sanchez High School and on Guam. My first 2 years, I was a teacher. And about almost half of my students spoke Tagalog as well as they're Filipino. And so absolutely, it is wonderful that you have all these different languages represented. You are very intentional about making sure it is a growing, living collection that you have going. Laurie Stansbury, you are an absolute gem. I am so grateful that we have finally had a chance to get an episode. You and I cross paths all the time. We're going to see each other in September. That's going to be fun.
It's going to be great.
I might hit you up for a ride from the airport, actually. So actually, we might need to coordinate a ride to and from the airport. So, Laurie Stansbury, I'm going to see you very soon. You are wonderful. Thank you so much. And I can't tell you how much this means to me because it is a great deal of work that you are going to be able to share with our listeners.
You are so very welcome.
Well, and tell me, you've got a summer ahead. I know that you have hobby time, but I hope that you're going to be able to take some time to just be selfishly indulgent and do things that are important to you.
Oh, no. I've got plants to plant. I went to Lowe's yesterday, and I've got hiking to do and shopping to be done.
Absolutely.
All the things.
And you know what, Laurie, would you just let us all know, where can we find you on social media? Because, everybody has different feelings about different platforms, but if they want to follow you like I do, let us know, where do you consistently share?
I consistently share on Twitter. So X, I still call it Twitter. I'm at Laurie Stansbury. And I'm on Facebook. I have a personal account, but I also have an account dedicated to my library. So it's CBES Library. if you want to see what's happening in my library that I feel comfortable sharing with my greater community. I am on Instagram, but I just post there. I don't get too much from it. I'm on Blue Sky, and I definitely need to be more active there. If you really want to hit me up on Twitter or Facebook.
Excellent. Have a fantastic summer, and I'll text you when I land.
All right.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Don't forget to use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. Friends, next week I will be traveling to San Diego to join the excitement of the American Library Association's annual conference. If you are also attending, I truly hope we cross paths. Message me on X, and I'll be handing out podcast swag and collecting recordings of attendees for an upcoming episode in July. And because I am in full podcast mode and recording all summer long, I will most definitely have an episode next Friday, June 28th. The topic of our episode will be Library Instigator and my conversation with Robin Thompson. I hope you will tune in.